Maseches Beitsa, Daf Lamed Aleph. In the middle of the page, the Gemora asks the question, Ezehu Karpef, which was the Mishnah's question, and in the Mishnah we had two opinions, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, and there's a question whether they argue completely. Each one says his factor, which he needs to make a good karpeh for this halacha to work, of being able to take the scattered wood on Yom Tov, and the other one says a different factor. So do they hold of each other at all, or are they completely divergent? That's the major questions Gemora is going to tackle. Okay, so Shabbatai, you start the Gemora, and then Sruli will have the fun with the Rashi.
So the question is, they say karpach. So what is a karpach? The Kuru. So they required of him.
No, they asked a question.
That was a question.
In the base midrash, they asked a question about this Mishnah.
How can he say?
Not how can he say, how did he say?
Why did he say that everything, kol samuch le'ir, is close to the ear?
Okay, so that's the question. When he said that statement that he requires that factor to be able to use the karpef, to be able to gather the wood there, did he mean, go ahead,
that it needs a key?
It has a key, it has a lock and key, so therefore that adds the other factor that Rabbi Yossi spoke of, and meaning Rabbi Yehuda requires it as well. He just didn't speak about it. So if he requires two factors, then that's a possible way to interpret his words. He needs samuch, but he also requires posachas. Then keep going.
Okay. Rabbi Yossi
L'meimar, which means
Yossi comes to say,
in response to what he just heard Rabbi Yehuda saying that he needs two factors, Rabbi Yossi came along and said, Nami.
See that even that it has a key, even that which is outside, which is
far away from the city, as long as it's within the Techum, it's okay. So he's coming along to say, you and I both agree it needs a posachas, but my opinion is that if it does have a posachas, if it does have a lock and key, then it can be even much farther away from the city than you would allow, and still be okay.
So this is the first version, right? Okay.
Well, Dilma,
perhaps,
or perhaps the other interpretation of the Mishnah would go like this.
Rabbi
Yehuda said it has to be
that's close to the
next to the city, and he meant
whether it has or it hasn't got a key.
Meaning it doesn't really require a posachas, as long as it's close to the city, he's happy. He only needs one factor, in other words. Right. Then the response to that is
he came along
to say
even
anywhere within the Techum, even if it's not next to the city, is okay. But only if it has a lock and key. So Rabbi Yossi saying, if it's a lock and key, it can be far away. And Rabbi Yehuda had said, it doesn't need a lock and key, but it has to be close. So that is a big difference between them. Aval, but this part of this way of looking at Rabbi Yossi would go on to say that he holds also what? Aval, but he would say, but if it's what? Late posachas.
If it doesn't have a key, even if it's close to the city, it doesn't need a key.
No, Nami Lo, also it would not be good.
Right.
So this simply said, he always needs a posachas. He always is going to need, in this version, lock and key to make it good. And then he says, if it has that, then I'll allow it anywhere in the tikkun. Yes. But if it doesn't have it, even next to the city won't help. So they're arguing in the case where it's next to the city without a posachas. If it's next to the city without a posachas, Rabbi Yehuda would say it's good, and Rabbi Yossi in the second version would say it's no good. And if it's far away, then according to Rabbi Yehuda, it would never be good no matter what. And according to Rabbi Yossi, if it has a posachas, it's good. So basically, this version would say, Rabbi Yehuda only requires next to the city, then he doesn't care about the posachas element. And Rabbi Yossi requires a posachas always, and then he would allow it to be anywhere within the tikkun, even far away. So each one in the Mishnah said exactly the factor that was important to him. Rabbi Yehuda mentioned the samuch le'ir, and that's what's important to him, and the other one's unimportant, but it has to be samuch le'ir or it's no good. And Rabbi Yossi mentioned posachas because that's the factor that's important to him, and if it doesn't have that, then no matter where it is, it's no good either. But if it has it, then it's good, no matter where it is. But of course, it has to be b'socha tchum because that's the halacha of you can't even walk beyond the tchum. So therefore, anything you talk about has to be within the tchum. Okay, so these are the two ways of looking at it. Basically, did they say exactly what they meant? Each one mentioned the factor that they really do hold of and they don't care about the other fellow. Or there's more of a discussion going on and they do overlap a bit. And Rabbi Yehuda requires samuch, but he also requires posachas. And that's where Rabbi Yossi is coming to say that if it has a posachas, it can be much farther away. Okay, those two possible interpretations of the Mishnah exist.
So I only need one according to Rabbi Yossi.
Excuse me?
I only need posachas.
Again, there's a question in the Gemora.
Yeah.
Which is the proper interpretation of the Mishnah, which is to say, which is the proper interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, and likewise Rabbi Yossi's Shita. There's two possible interpretations. We're not sure at this point which is the right interpretation. So the Gemara is making an inquiry, which is the proper interpretation of the Mishnah. But both of them at this point are possible and are good interpretations. So if you're asking me something, don't ask me, as if there's only one interpretation. There are two interpretations at this point.
What's the two again?
You see the words of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah?
Yeah.
He says there has to be a samuch le'ir.
Correct.
Did he also mean, he just didn't speak it out, that it has to have a posachas?
I don't know.
That's a possibility, the Gemara says. And if that's what he meant, when Rabbi Yossi says there has to be a posachas, well, Rabbi Yehuda agreed to that already. He already said there has to be a posachas. So what's Rabbi Yossi really saying? All he's saying is that it has to be a posachas, you're right, but if it does, then it's allowed to be far away.
Yep.
But if it'll be close to the city, according to this way of learning, it still has to have a posachas. So everybody's in agreement. It needs a posachas no matter what, in this interpretation. The only question is, does that posachas, is that enough? Or you also need the factor of samuch le'ir. That would be Rabbi Yehuda's position in this interpretation.
So everybody agrees you need a posachas.
In the first interpretation.
First interpretation. Okay, but the question does it have to be someone for the ear or not?
Right. So Rabbi Yehuda says yes, and that's what Rabbi Yossi meant when he said to him it needs a posachas. Not that they're arguing about the posachas per se. Everyone agrees there needs to be a posachas. What did he mean there has to be a posachas? He meant, since we all agree there's a posachas, he wanted to just inform Rabbi Yehuda that once it has a posachas, according to Rabbi Yossi, it can be as far away as you like, as long as it's within the tichum.
So Rabbi says it doesn't have to be someone very long.
Right. That's very simple, right? Everyone needs posachas, but you also need samach l'ir. Yehuda says yes, Rabbi Yossi says no. Simple. Right? Going with the 2 milas versus 1 mila, Rabbi Yehuda says you need 2 milas to allow you to pick up the wood, and Rabbi Yossi says no, only 1 mile is enough. And as we were saying before, the issue is muksa, so basically this factor, whatever we're talking about, samach l'ir or posachas, in some way makes it more accessible or more definitive in the person's mind, right? Because muksa depends on a person's mind. Is his mind focused on these items? Then they're not muksa, because he thought about it beforehand. But if they're not, his mind is not focused on these items, then it very likely will be muksa. So that would be the question: to get a person's mind focused on these pieces of wood, these scattered pieces of wood in the karpeh, you needed to have 2 milas for him to focus on it, samuch and posachas, each one as a contributing factor to his mind being able to focus on these items, because it's close enough to the city and it also has a lock and key. He knows it's going to be there the next day. Or you don't need 2 factors, 1 factor is enough. That's basically the first approach. Okay? What's the second approach? It's more literal in the words of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda said you need samach l'ir, but he never mentioned posachas, which implies that he only needs 1 mila, not 2, and the mila that he needs is the one that he mentioned, samach l'ir. Very simple, much more straightforward in a way. And Rabbi Yossi likewise only mentioned posachas because by him, that is also the only factor that you need. Okay, so according to that, everybody needs 1 mila, not 2. Only question is, which is the mila that you need? You either need the mila of samuch, but posachas doesn't add or detract anything. That would be Rabbi Yehuda's approach. To get you to concentrate properly on the wood, that it shouldn't be muksa. As long as it's samuch, your mind is concentrated on it. As we've had earlier in the Masechta, we had such a thing with the animals giving birth and so forth. We said if it's very close by, your mind is more on it. And Rabbi Yossi says no, the main thing is just as long as it's accessible, and within the tchum is accessible, and it'll be there the next day because it's locked up as a posachas. So they only need, according to each one of them, their own mila, but each one is to the exclusion of the other, right? The mila of this approach, of the second approach, is that it's much more faithful to the words of the Mishnah, seemingly. Each one's saying 1 factor, and that's the factor they need. They don't need the other factor. Whereas the first approach to the Mishnah presupposes that Rabbi Yehuda only mentions samach, but he also needs posachas. And you have to find a reason then. Why didn't he say posachas if he also requires posachas? Rashi comes up with an idea on that. But the major question is, why would we prefer to go ahead and put words into Rabbi Yehuda's mouth that he never says? Why is that a better way of learning the Mishnah? Why would that even be a possible interpretation that we want to entertain? Right? The second approach, much more faithful to their words. Rabbi Yehuda says samuch, because that's what he needs, only samuch. Rabbi Yossi says posachas, because that's all he needs is posachas. Each one said 1 factor, and that's what they need. That's a much better interpretation, in my opinion. It's right in the words of the Mishnah, than the first interpretation, which presupposes that Rabbi Yehuda needs posachas as well as samach. He just didn't mention it for some reason. Why would we even try to propose such an interpretation that infuses into the Mishnah words into Rabbi Yehuda's mouth that he never said? Why would we want to do that? What do you think, Sruli?
All the
Do
middle
you
ones.
like when someone puts words in your mouth?
No.
So why should we do that to Rabbi Yehuda? Is that fair?
No. You won't understand what he means.
Why wouldn't you just assume he said what he means? Why would you try to... Maybe he means more than that.
Because we're unclear, so it
It's
means.
clear, he says you need samach. What's not clear about that? If you have samach, it's good. If you don't have samach, it's no good. There's something wrong with that? Apparently so. The first version wants to put more words into his mouth.
Can you say that in the same way that Rabbi Yossi didn't mention the key, Rabbi Yossi didn't mention the closeness to the ear?
Well,
The
if you say
Mishnah-
they both need samach and they both need posachas, they're the same shita.
No, we know that Rabbi Yehuda definitely won't accept Tachum. He doesn't accept that. But the other one does accept close to the ear, right? Rabbi
Accepting
Yossi-
close to the ear, what do you mean?
Rabbi Yossi requires a key.
It's not worse if it's closer.
It's not worse, right? I mean, if you can
If
put
he allows it to be
exactly,
half a mile away, certainly would allow it if it was closer.
but Rabbi Yehuda would not allow that.
Right?
Okay. So in the same way that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't mention the key, Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah doesn't mention the closeness. He mentions
Because it's
the
not a
form.
factor that he needs. They're only mentioning factors that they need. By him, there's only one factor he needs. The other
Yeah.
factor is not even a factor he needs.
Yeah. Okay.
There might be incidentally a case of something that he would be okay with, but not because by doing that you've done something good. By bringing it closer, you haven't done anything good in his eyes. You haven't added to the picture by bringing it closer.
It's not entirely symmetrical because Rabbi Yehuda would accept close to the ear, but not the Tachum, whereas Rabbi Yossi would accept to keep both places. Right? It's
But it is in the sense, if you think of it, that
lopsided, so to speak.
Rabbi Yehuda is saying it has to be samach, okay, and posachas.
Right.
And Rabbi Yossi is coming along and saying that's nice,
Yes.
but the truth is, and then there's a case that you're denying that I'm all for.
Right.
So it's just adding to the mix.
Okay.
That's a normal machlokas. But that's my point. My point is, why would you want to say the first version, which puts words into Rabbi Yehuda's mouth?
Why do we have to add the words and every his own?
Yes. Why would we think that's a good version? Why is it like any boy lahu? Maybe that's a good version. Maybe the other one's the good version. What's the suffix? Of course, the first version where you're putting words into his mouth is not even. I don't even like it. I wouldn't even want to say it. Why would the Gemora even want to suggest it? The answer is because when two people argue, especially Tanoim, it's better if they agree with each other
They disagree.
on the majority of their points. They agree. There's just one small minor disagreement.
Someone clear or not? Let's be someone clear.
Okay, correct. So that's the point. It's better, even if we have to put words in Rabbi Yehuda's mouth, we make them much closer together. We bring them closer together, that their machlokas is like this and not like this. That's not a normal machlokas, to say they're so far away from each other. Neither of them holds of the other one. This one says there's a mile in samuch, this one says no mile in samuch. The only mile is posachas. This one says mile is posachas. This one says there's no mile in posachas, only in samuch. They don't have any agreement at all whatsoever. They're completely divergent. That's not a good machlokas, right? A good machlokas between two Tanoim is we basically agree on everything. One minor disagreement. That's a good machlokas. That one small factor. You say you need that. I say no. But we have a common ground. We agree on one thing, and there's one thing we don't agree on, but we agree on the major thing. That will be much more what Rashi calls derech hashas. It's the normal way of shas. It's the normal way of the Gemora, of Mishnayos, to produce machlokas where there's one small factor that separates them. In fact, it's a good lesson to remember when you find yourself arguing with someone, to stop and say, look, we basically agree on everything.
But I didn't agree on.
But there are many things you can't agree on. And if you start focusing on that, and then you realize what you're really not arguing on is a small little thing, you don't feel as far away from that person. and it's much more likely to reach a resolution. Because then you realize all I have to do is like make one small little concession, and we're almost together. Okay? It's a very good lesson on how to keep shalom bayis, for example. Or anytime you're having a machlokas with someone, to say, look, we basically agree on almost everything. Let's first talk about that. But if we really don't agree on anything, we don't see eye to eye on anything, then it's very, very likely we'll never find a solution. So the best way to find shalom is to see all the things we have in common, which there may be many, and the one small thing that we disagree on, and then we can feel a little bit more easy about conceding in on that issue. So here, that's why I believe the first approach, which is suggested as a possible approach to interpreting this Mishnah, to understanding Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Yossi, is that they really agree on very many things. You know what they agree on? It needs a posachas. Everyone agrees on that. We all agree on that. The only thing they disagree on, do you also need a samuch, a mile of samuch? But, for example, Rabbi Huda agrees posachas is a mila, and that you need it. Rabbi Huda, they both agree on that. The only thing you disagree on, do you also need samuch? Get it? That's why the Gemora would rather go out on a limb and suggest and put words into Rabbi Huda's mouth, because that makes it a normal machlokas tanoim, where they actually agree on many things and they're only disagreeing on one small factor. That's a much more plausible machlokas tanoim than to have them very divergent. I don't see eye to eye with you on anything. I only need this, and the thing that you say we need, I think that's garnished. That's ridiculous. It's stupid. Right? That's not a good machlokas, because I really agree with you on almost everything. One small thing we disagree on. Okay, let's agree to disagree. Good. Now we can go on. That's what the Gemora is suggesting, because that's a better machlokas tanoim. That's the normal way the Chazal present to us machlokas tanoim. Even though we know there are times when two tanoim might disagree in a much more severe way, but it's usually presented in such a way. We really agree on a lot of things. Okay? One small thing we disagree on.
Wash my face off.
I agree on that totally. Just turn off the camera. Yes, please. Really gets to read the Rashi.
Okay.
There's not that much Rashi on the question, but it does set everything up.
Which one?
I would say it would be... is there a Rashi there? Maybe there's no Rashi yet. No, there's no Rashi yet. Okay, you're off the hook for the meantime. Let's go back into the Gemora then. Tashma.
Tashma. So the Gemara brings a proof. Mika Katani. So the fact that we learned in the Mishnah, Rav Yossi Omer, Chol Sheni, Nisim Ro, the Patachat, that everyone who enters... Any karpef. Remember the question was, what is the good karpef? It says, Kol, any karpef. It's passive, that is entered.
The people enter into it.
It needs a key.
With a key.
Even with the distant ones.
Okay, so somehow or other, these words of Rabbi Yossi, the Gemara is now saying, are very, very important. In other words, let's put it this way. The words of Rabbi Huda could be interpreted two ways. Now we're saying that the words of Rabbi Yossi are very definitive and are going to be the key to understanding his Shita. And not only that, from Rabbi Yossi's words, we can work back to Rabbi Huda. Right? The question was really how to interpret Rabbi Huda, and likewise, once we know how to interpret Rabbi Huda, we'll understand Rabbi Yossi. But the Gemara's answer is, if you look closely at the words of Rabbi Yossi, that'll be the key to everything. Excuse the pun. Because then, from what he's saying, it's very clear what he means. We'll see in Rashi how these words show you anything, because we knew these words before, but somehow now we're concentrating more on the ramifications of every word that he said, and then we're going to end up going backwards to Rabbi Yehuda to interpret Rabbi Yehuda again. Right? So we're not shying away from the job that we originally said. We want to understand Rabbi Yehuda's words. Did he mean only Samuch or also Posachas? But the way we're going to get to Rabbi Yehuda to figure out what he meant is through Rabbi Yossi. By analyzing properly his words and understanding his approach, and he was talking to Rabbi Yehuda, we'll understand back to Rabbi Yehuda what Rabbi Yehuda must have been saying. Right? It's like if you hear a conversation, but you're only close enough to hear one person, but you hear them saying, I think your cooking is good too, right? So you know that he was talking to someone who said his cooking was good. And the proper response was, I think your cooking is good too. So if you hear one side of the argument, you can sometimes work your way back to the other side. That's what the Gemora is saying we'll do now. The Chiddush is not so much that, as that the words of Rabbi Yossi that we originally said could be understood two ways, now we're saying it's not true. There's only one interpretation of his words, and therefore the Gemora doesn't even explain it. Rosh is going to have to work overtime here to try to get all this meaning into his words, and that's what the Gemora said. Okay, so therefore if he said that, then we can be sure. So we hear from these words of Rabbi Yossi that
he holds two leniencies.
Two different cases of leniency.
Should we just finish off?
Okay.
Amar Rav Saba, Amar Rabbi
Yirmiyah.
Halacha ki Rabbi Yossi Kula.
Let's take the Rashis.
Now we have the Rashis right in front of us.
What's the old mass? This one, right?
No. The first Rashi, which I think would be appropriate, would be Rabbi Yossi Lakula or Lachomra Ka'amar. Oh. So I made a mistake. I saw those words. I thought it was the Rashi that would be on what Shabbatai just read. But Rashi's starting with a girsa that he doesn't hold of. That's why I didn't see these in the Gemora, because they aren't in the Gemora. Rashi says not to read them. So let's start with that. Okay, but it's really going backwards in the Gemora. Back to the question.
Which one?
Go ahead.
Which one is it?
Rabbi Yossi Lakula or Lachomra Ka'amar Lo Garsina.
Where is it?
It's, you see where the Gemora starts with Yichidahi, that one up top where the Gemora starts by saying it's a Yichidah.
Yes.
So it's maybe two Rashis after that.
It's not hard enough to read my book.
I think not all editions have it in bold print like the rest, because very often when Rosh is just clearing up a girsa, a lot of editions don't put it in bold print.
What is the word, the non-beginner?
Rebbe Yossi. Starts with
Yes,
the words
I've got
Rebbe
it.
Yossi.
Okay, I'll have it.
And then it says Lakula or Lachumra. Apparently there was a girsa that said, does Rebbe Yossi go Lakula or Lachumra? Rashi says,
Lachim Perish.
no.
Yeah, that's the second there. There it is. Rabbi Yossi Lakula or...
Rabbi Yossi Lakula Chuluka.
So there was a girsa that says that. Did he say Lakula or Lachumra?
Lo
So
Garsina.
Rashi says Lo Garsina. Meaning
Lo
those
Garsina.
words, according to Rashi, should not appear in a Gemora. That's why if you look in our Gemora, they do not appear. Because our printing of the Gemora tends to follow Rashi's suggestions. Wherever Rashi says, don't read something, the printer said, okay, I'm listening to Rashi, I'm not going to print it. Okay? So the printing that we have almost always follows Rashi's suggestions. That's why Rashi here says, don't put it in, and lo and behold, in our edition, it's not there. You know why? Because Rashi said not to read it. So the printer listened. Sometimes it's very confusing because Rashi says, don't read something. We're like, what is he talking about? I don't have it in my Gemora. Why was he getting so upset about it? It's not in my Gemora. The answer is, you know why it's not in your Gemora? Because Rashi gave instructions to the printer not to print it, basically. Even though there weren't printers in Rashi's day, but basically saying, don't read this in the Gemora. Don't put this in the Gemora. In Rashi's day, he would say to the people who used to copy, the scribes who used to copy the Gemoras into manuscripts, he would basically telling them, when you copy this Gemora, do not include those words. Right? Don't just keep writing because you happen to see it in a previous manuscript. Rashi said, you find it in a previous manuscript, don't include it in your new manuscript. Anyone who writes a new manuscript should leave these words out. Okay, so Rashi is very much against this version of a Gemora that seems to project Rabbi Yossi, maybe he's Lakula, maybe he's Lachumra. Rashi says that's not the right girsa, that's not the right words. Now Rashi will back himself up. Why? Why would he say that? Why does Rashi feel though those words are not appropriate? Deha, because behold.
Why the Chumrah? Sorry, why the Chumrah? We know he holds Lakula, two leaders.
Maybe that's why Rashi doesn't want to even entertain this girsa, because there's no such thing as Rabbi Yossi Lachumra.
So where does he get this from then?
No, there is a girsa. Let's say you read manuscripts, right?
Yeah.
And you go, like today they have in Hebrew University the ancient manuscripts. Rabbi Katzman often goes down there to check out other manuscripts. Okay? So there might be an ancient manuscript which had these words in it. Now, does that mean they were supposed to be there, or an error crept in? Rashi says, an error crept in. Sorry, they're not supposed to be there. Okay? Now he's going to prove it. Like sometimes Rosh would just say his opinion, but sometimes he backs it up with an idea or a logical proof or even a regular proof. Here's trying to prove it. Deha, because behold.
Also, Rabbi Yehuda, the men of Rabbi Yehuda, we also
are asking about. The Gemora is asking about Rabbi Yehuda. So to put it a question as if you're wondering how Rabbi Yossi holds, makes it sound like you're not worried about Rabbi Yehuda. But Rashi says no, but that's not even true. Rabbi Yehuda is a major part of the question of the Gemora. So how can you put in a girsa which makes it sound like we're wondering about Rabbi Yossi when really what we're wondering about is Rabbi Yehuda? And the girsa which Rashi is saying to strike from the Gemora, not to include in the Gemora, is a girsa which makes it sound like we're only worried about Rabbi Yossi and not Rabbi Yehuda. That's why Rashi's against the girsa. So we are asking, Miboy Alon, Heichi Itmar, how did he mean to say? Right? That's what the Gemora's question is. But the Gemora is wondering about only Rabbi Yossi or also about Rabbi Yehuda? Even about Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rashi just said. We want to know also, Heichi Itmar, how did he mean to say? How were his words meant to be interpreted? So Rashi says, how could you have a girsa that makes it sound like we're only interested in Rabbi Yossi when it's not true? That's why Rashi feels that girsa is inappropriate, which is ironic because at the end of Gemora, you know how we're using the words Rabbi Yossi to go and prove, right? We are going to actually use the words of Rabbi Yossi to prove, but as Rashi says at the very end of the Gemora, it still doesn't mean we're only worried about Rabbi Yossi. It just means from Rabbi Yossi we can work our way back to Rabbi Yehuda. So it is true that the words of Rabbi Yossi are going to be, in the end of the day, the most important thing, but not because we're only worried about him, but because he's the key to understanding both his Shita and Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. Okay, so we've gotten the wrong girsa out of the way, right? So now we're ready to dig in and talk about the right girsa. So Rashi says, V'hachi garsinan, this is the right girsa, which you and I would say, why does Rashi have to tell us the right girsa? It's in our Gemora. Rashi's telling me something I already know. The answer is, again, how come it's in our Gemora? Because Rashi already instructed the printers what to print. So you're looking at it backwards. Rashi now is telling us how to read the Gemora properly. It looks like our Gemora, so why is he's wasting everyone's time? No, because he took his time to tell us how to read the text. That's how the printers later knew to print our Gemora like Rashi's instructions, right? So Rashi basically, even though you'll find other Rishonim often argue with Rashi, and there are sometimes fierce questions about what the proper girsa is in the Gemora, but the printers, generally speaking, followed Rashi's instructions, right? So therefore, sometimes it'll look like Rashi's saying things that I don't need, because why do I need to be told the girsa? It's in my Gemora. The answer is, you're looking at it backwards. Because Rashi made a big thing out of it, that's why the printers took him seriously, and when they printed the Gemora, they did exactly according to Rashi's instructions. So often, exactly what Rashi's raising a ruckus about will be what you find in the Gemora. Because Rashi is, after all, the greatest of all of the Rishonim. So printers decided to follow his instructions rather than others, usually. Okay, there are exceptions. Now, so let's go on. What does Rashi say the proper girsa is? Now we're going to basically read the girsa that we have in the Gemora, Hachi Garsina, and this is the proper girsa.
Hachi Garsina is the proper Ibai.
They had a shaila, the Bnei Yeshiva had a shaila. How did Rabbi Yehuda mean when he said it has to be samach li the ear?
When he said samach le'ir, it's because it's
is it v'hu that it is for sure also
the islay polisachas? He'll say has to have a key.
Has to have a key. That he just didn't mention it, but he also for sure needs a key, and all he meant was it has to also be samuch. And then, if that's what he's saying, it needs both milas, samuch and posachas, but asa.
Rabbi Yossi Lameima, and Rabbi Yossi coming to say, given the Islay posachas, so it's.
It does have a posachas. Everybody agrees it needs a posachas. Then.
I believe it's Chum Shabbos Nami. Even within the boundary of the Shabbos, within the boundary of.
Which means even far away from the city, as long as it's within the boundary, it's okay.
It's okay. Or Dilma.
That means he only needs 1 mile.
1 mile.
The mile of posachas. Right? Techum Shabbos is not a mile, it's just a limitation. Nobody can go beyond the Techum, so that you always mention the Techum as a limit to anything that you talk about. But it's not a mile. Oh, Dilma.
Perhaps, this is what he means to say.
This is what Rabbi Yehuda meant to say when he said samuch. He meant any karpet which is samuch to the ear is okay.
Whether he has a key, he doesn't have a key.
Right, and he only needs samuch. He doesn't care about posachas whatsoever. He only needs 1 mila, but the mila he needs is samuch. And that's what he said, you only need 1 mila. Then asa, he came along to say in a response to that, anywhere that's within the tchum is okay.
It's only when he has a key.
Right, it needs a key, that's the mila that he requires. He doesn't require something, but it needs a mila posachas. Aval, but according to Rabbi Yossi, if you have a karpet that doesn't have a posachas, wouldn't be good, because he doesn't look at samach as a mile at all either. Okay?
Yeah.
So those are the two. All Rashi did so far was really give us the girsa. Right now, and first he dealt with the girsa he didn't like. Now he's just basically listing everything that Shabbatai just read. Everything you just read is really what Shabbatai read before. Just the girsa that we do like, that he does like. And in that girsa, it goes on to say, Rashi's still just quoting the girsa, Tashma. Which is interesting to remember. Sometimes it looks like a very long Rashi, but it's all just the words of the Gemora.
Yeah.
Rashi hasn't said anything yet, except his opinion about this is the proper girsa, which is important. But as far as like, oh my gosh, it's such a long Rashi, no, this part's not what makes it long. There is a longer Rashi later on, but this one's not really long because it's just re-quoting the Gemora, basically giving us an opportunity to review the Gemora one more time. So Shabbat can dream about it. Yeah. Tashma.
From which Rabbi Yossi told the Mishnah and says, Kol shenichnasim lo poisachas, that he enters with a key.
Any karpet where you can enter with a key. Then even if it's anywhere within the Techum, it's okay. So the Gemara made a diuk from that. Again, still not anything new. Rashi just quoting the words of our Gemora. Shema Mina, the Gemara made a diuk from that. that he's obviously
Going contrary.
allowing two different cases of kula. Okay, and all the way up till there is just what? Quoting the Gemora. Rosh didn't do anything more yet. He just quoted
Paraphrasing the Gemora.
Not really paraphrasing, just saying, quoting. It's a direct quote.
Why did he leave out the other Shmona?
I don't know. Maybe because that would sound like we're finished, and Rashi said, I'm not yet finished, I really have to go back and explain the whole thing now. So, now we're into Peders. Hachi Perusha. Rashi says, now I owe you an explanation about all that. Heichi Ka'amar. So he's going all the way back to the beginning of the question. This is the beginning of the Rashi, really. He's now going back to explain the Iboilahu, the two different ways of interpreting the Mishnah, and then the final resolution. So he's going all the way back to the two different ways of interpreting the Mishnah.
All that is close to the city.
Meaning where Yehuda said it has to be close to the city.
The
first interpretation is to assume that he meant that there has to also be a posachas,
key.
which is, Rashi now finally explains what a posachas is, mafteach. And Rashi could have told us this in the Mishnah, by the way. This word posachas appears in the Mishnah, but for some reason Rashi waited till here to tell us what it means. Right? Sometimes it's just, that's the way it is. Now, Rashi says, once there's a key implies a lock. So, in really, what it's really saying, key really means a lock and a key. Right? Important thing about a key is that if there's a key, there's a lock. And that's what ensures that it's going to be there tomorrow. The key is not really the key.
The key's the key.
It's the fact that a key only works when there's a lock. So the main thing is that there's a lock. Of course, if there's a lock without a key, you're in trouble as well. But having a lock and a key ensures that what? Rashi says, that makes it what?
See?
Mishtamer, which Rashi did use this word in the Mishnah.
Got it.
Okay, now we understand a little bit more what he means. If there's a key, a lock and a key, of course, now whatever's inside that carpet, like say the wood that's in there, is guarded.
What does taka mean?
In fact, really. It's like ka. I think the word says ka. Okay, taka. Okay, so Rashi's saying it is guarded, and we said already one of the milos of being guarded is that I can know it's there the next day. Right? Not like the leaves that might blow away. This is like the leaves with the kli on it. Now it ensures that it'll be there the next day, which I need. Right? In fact, that's what happened. All the way back in the Mishnah, when Rashi mentioned Mishtamer, he also mentioned the other milo. Okay. The high. So now Rashi has a question. If he really needs a posachas, if even Rabbi Yehuda needs posachas, then why didn't he mention it in the Mishnah? Why we're putting words in his mouth? I asked you before, why do we want to put words in his mouth? Okay, I gave an answer to that. I don't know if you understood what I said or remember what I said, but now there's a new question. Okay, let's say we have a reason to put words in his mouth, but why didn't he taka say it? Why really didn't he say it? Why? Why wouldn't he say it if he means it?
You want to narrow the arguments.
No, that's why we want to interpret it that way. But now I have a new question. Let's say you really do, you feel it's important to interpret the Mishnah that way, right?
Yes.
But then why wouldn't he mention it? Why didn't Rabbi Yehuda mention if he needs two milos, why didn't he mention both milos? Right? And like a mushal. A mushal for this would be Rabbi Shmuel. Remember yesterday we had Shmuel? Shmuel says, don't listen to the Mishnah. Mishnah's a chidah.
Yes.
What's the real pshat? What's the real halacha?
Majority
You need two
milos.
milas. What are the two milas that Shmuel said you need? Karpef.
And has to be gathered.
And has to be gathered. Right? So you tell me both things you need. I mean, if you need two things, then tell me you need two things. So that's a basic question. We're supposing now, for whatever the reason we said before is a good reason, whatever, that there are two things that he requires. But then why didn't he say it? You know, if he really requires two things, then why didn't he say two things?
Who?
Rabbi Yehuda. Why do you only mention one of the two things he needs? It's like your wife tells you, I need two things in the makol, and she only writes one thing on the list. You get to the makol, you're like, what do I do? I know she needs 2 things, but there's only one thing on the list.
Yep.
And this is before telephones. You couldn't just call home and find out, right? So why did Rabbi Yehuda not mention the other factor that he needs if he really does need it? So let him mention it. So Rosh is telling me to answer that now. V'hai, or v'hai, the end of the line. V'hai, and this fact. Which is probably bothering you, Rashi says. That what? That he didn't what?
Mentioned to say two matters explicitly.
Explicitly, right? He did mention one of them, but why not mention the other one? Why not mention the posachas? Why did he mention it clearly like he did samuch? Rashi says, I have an answer for that. That's one of Rashi's jobs, to explain why something's missing that should have been there. Mishum.
Okay, the kasava stamming. You'll stam with any condition.
What?
Stamon means no condition.
No.
Stam, huh?
Stam. You know what a stam mishnah is?
Ordinary.
Like a normal, right? A normal. That means if I want to tell you something extra, I'll have to tell you something extra. Without telling you something extra, it's just the normal, right? I tell you, bring me a Gemora. So you go upstairs and get a normal Gemora. You say, no, I didn't mean that one. I meant the special one. You say, well, Rebbe just said bring a Gemora. I brought the normal Gemora, the Stam Gemora. Because you didn't tell me you needed a special one, right? So that's kind of what we're saying over here. Rabbi Yehuda didn't need to mention it because that's Stam.
It's normal.
Right? And the nun at the end means their normal karpef, in other words.
Normal karpef.
Yeah. Yesh lahem posachas.
An enclosure has a key, right?
That's right. A normal enclosure, let's say of their day at least, had a key.
So why would
right? Maybe out in Wyoming, where they have a corral for the horses, they don't need a key because that's the Wild West or something, right? But maybe in the Army stars are talking about in Eretz Israel, a bunch of Jews, right? They know Bedouins are hanging around. They have a lock.
Wild West African town.
Exactly, right? So the point being that Rashi's trying to answer, why didn't he mention it? I didn't mention it because he didn't need to mention it, because it's normal. If I say, bring me a bicycle, and you bring me a bicycle with one wheel. I said, well, what is that? That's a unicycle. That's right? You say, no, this is a bicycle, Rabbi. It's not a normal bicycle. When I said bicycle, obviously I meant with 2 wheels. Bicycle, right? 2 wheels. Alright, so Rashi's saying, that's why I didn't mention it, because you know what? That's a normal one. A normal, who doesn't have a lock and a key on their karpef? Right? Don't you have a... Okay? So Rashi's saying, that might explain why he didn't have to mention it, because that's normal. So just saying, it's like saying karpef is an enclosure. Did anyone have to say it's an enclosure? Did you see anyone mention that it's an enclosure? Did you see anyone mention it's an enclosure? No, it just said the word karpef. You know it's an enclosure. So Rashi's saying, if their normal karpef had a lock and key, it also explains why he didn't mention lock and key, because it's a normal. Okay, and therefore, since it's the normal one,
Stam karpef place Amra
Lamilse. He said over his matter, meaning his shita of needing it to be samuch, about a stam karpef. That's what he really basically came along and said. Which karpef can you gather the wood that's scattered? First of all, obviously a normal karpef that has a lock and key. But I'm telling you the extra thing that you didn't know, because some karpefos aren't next to the city, some of them are farther away, I needed to be samuch. That's all I needed to say. But the other thing was assumed. Okay, this is Rashi's explanation of why it wasn't mentioned. Thank you, Rashi. That was wonderful. Let's go on. Then, if that's what Rabbi Yehuda's holding, you need both, and he only mentioned one, but he really needs both, then Asa Rabbi Yossi.
The Meima came to Isai Pasachas, Loiba Ilan Somov. You don't need, since it needs a key, don't you?
Right. Since everyone normally has a pasachas, so every karpef will be okay as long as it's within the tichun. Doesn't need to be samuch.
Doesn't need to be Somov.
And Rashi says, Umamela.
Applies automatically to lays like Pesach, but if he doesn't have a key, but in a Samach, we do require has a universal city.
Okay, so Rashi's adding in something now that you wouldn't have known from the Gemora. Rashi's saying, in this version, the first version of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda required two things, Samuch and Posachas. And Rabbi Yossi said, once you have Posachas, you can have it much farther away. But Rashi's adding, and what if it's Samuch according to Rabbi Yossi? Look what Rashi just said. If it has a Posachas, if it doesn't have a Posachas, Rashi says, in Rabbi Yossi he's saying it. If it doesn't have a Posachas,
it's like Pesachas, but in a Samach.
then we need Samuch. Okay? That means if I have a karpef, which is Samuch, but not without a Posachas, will it be good?
He lays like not.
What is it saying over here?
If he doesn't have a key, it needs to be Samach.
It needs to be Samuch.
If we don't have,
If you don't have a key, it needs to be Samuch. Meaning 1 mile is okay.
but
If you don't have the milo Posachas, then it needs to be Samuch. It means the other milo.
yes.
Then it means that if I have a karpef that's Samuch, but without a Posachas, is it good?
Yes.
He just said yes.
Yes.
That's what he's saying. If you need to have Samuch, but with the Samuch it's good. He just said a Chiddush. According to Rabbi Yossi, if it's Samuch, it's good. Meaning he only needs 1 milah. So Rabbi Yehuda needs both milas, Samuch and Posachas. It's like a double chumrah, because Samuch also needs Posachas, but even with Posachas, it has to be Samuch. Can't be far away. Whereas Rabbi Yossi, according to the first version, Rashi's saying, he will be happy with 1 milah.
Rabbi Yossi would have to use 1 liner.
That's right. So if it has a Posachas, it doesn't need to be Samuch, it can be far away, within the Tuchum. But if it doesn't have a Posachas, then it needs to have the other mile of Samuch.
That's all.
So it's interesting because now Rashi just made it that even Rabbi Yossi agrees that Samuch is a Maila. Posachas is a Maila, they both agree on that. And Samuch is a Maila, they both agree on that. Just don't agree on whether you need both or on one is good enough. So the first version not only bridges 1 gap, it bridges 2 gaps. They both hold that both Mailas are Mailas. Rabbi Yossi holds their 2 Mailas, Samuch and Posachas, each one is a Maila. You just don't need 2 Mailas, 1 is enough. And Rabbi Yehuda says they're both Mailas, but you need both of them. So they're very much in agreement in the first version. That's what I said to you before. The first version, even though it's not faithful to their words really, but the reason why we're pushing for it because it bridges the gap wonderfully. They mamish agree almost entirely with each other, as I said before, right? The gap is very, very small. Is Samuch a Maila? Yes, it's a Maila. Is Posachas a Maila? Yes, it's a Maila. Do you need both Mailas? Rabbi Yehuda says yes. And Rabbi Yossi says no, 1 mile is enough. But they both agree that Posachas is a Maila and Samuch is a Maila. That's a big advantage of the first girsa, of the first approach. Sorry. So Rashi just added an important factor.
Ashtar b'hachi.
And once you have it Samuch, even without a Posachas, Rashi says Ishtari b'hachi. It would become.
What's Ishtari?
It's from the word shari.
Oh,
It's like the passive of shari. It becomes permissible.
Becomes permissible.
B'hachi, with such a thing. That's what Rashi just said. If it does, according to Rabbi Yosef, if it doesn't have a Posachas, then you do need it to be Samuch, but Ishtari b'hachi, but that makes it permissible. Which is another way of saying that Samuch by itself is enough to make it permissible according to Rabbi Yossi. Again, you only need 1 Maila. So they both agree Samuch is a Maila. They both agree Posachas is a Maila. The only thing they disagree is you need 2 Mailas or 1 Maila. If you need two, you need both. Samuch and posachas, that's Rabbi Yehuda. If you only need 1 mile, you can have either or. Samuch without posachas, or posachas without being samuch.
Okay.
Now, Rashi says,
Medeloi sharusa.
Nideh
Medetale shi.
Sharyusa.
Ein samuch.
Okay, now this is a bit of a complicated sentence. Let's just take it slowly. Mideh means what? From the fact that
Tale means hanging, right? No.
he made dependent. Hanging means sometimes making something dependent. If you hang your hat on a hook, it's dependent on that hook. Without the hook, it'll fall down. So it's another way of saying, like someone asks you a question, can you go today? It's talui. That's what they say in Hebrew. Talui, it depends. If it'll rain, I can't go. If it won't rain, I can go. Right? So, talui means it's hanging in the balance, but it means it's dependent on a certain factor. So Rashi's saying, when you say, I need a certain thing, you're making everything dependent on that one factor. So Rashi's saying, Rabbi Yossi made everything dependent on what? Just a second. Miditala sharyusa. In other words, shari we had before, Eastery. Here, sharyusa means the permissibility. The permission, in other words.
The heter.
The heter. So since he made the heter dependent,
Ein samuch
no. So bi in the case that's ein samuch, he has the base twice. So the first time he's saying in a case of ein samuch, in a case that's far away. In other words, he made the permissibility in the case that's not next to the city, meaning that's far away. He made the permissibility in that case dependent on bi posachas. Again, bi she'ein samuch is the case. In a case that's not next. So you have to look at the sentence like that. He made the permissibility in the case that's not next to the city dependent on what? Posachas. So Rashi's saying, miditola, from the fact that he made dependent the permissibility in the case where it's not samuch, he made that whole case of permissibility dependent on what? On the posachas. So from the very fact that he did that, he made everything depend on the posachas when it's far away. So therefore, michlal, from that we can infer Nami Shari, that if you'll have it next to the city, then you don't even need posachas. So it's as if he said to Rabbi Yehuda, if you're saying far away doesn't work, but I'm saying it could work far away if you have a posachas. So he only dragged in posachas when he wanted to explain why far away is okay. So Rashi says, you see, when he wanted to tell you far away is okay, that's when he mentioned posachas. So Rashi is saying, from the very fact that he waited till then to tell you about posachas, means that if it's next to the city, he doesn't need posachas. That's how Rashi just went from Rabbi Yossi needing posachas far away to all of a sudden telling you, but if it's samach, he doesn't need posachas. Because Rashi said that's really what he said. When he had to tell you it's permissible far away, that's when he brought in posachas. And since he waited till then to bring it in, that implies very much that if it would be next to the city, he doesn't really need posachas. That's what Rashi just said. That in the first version, Rashi feels that it's implied that Rabbi Yossi only needs one of two milos, either samuch, even without posachas, or posachas without samuch. Either one is good. How did Rashi know that? Because if you look at the Gemora, it doesn't quite say that. If you look at the Gemora, it says, he doesn't say anything about what happens in samuch. Rashi put all of that in on his own. If you look at the Gemora, in the first version, it says, Asa Rabbi Yossi Lameimar. Rabbi Yossi came to say, once it has a posachas, Afilu b'sokas techum Shabbos. But what does Rabbi Yossi hold about samuch? Sounds like he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that it needs to have a posakas as well. Rashi says no. That's not the right way to learn. If Rabbi Yehuda is saying you need both, and Rabbi Yossi only brought in posakas when he talks about far away, that means if it's close, he doesn't need it to have a posakas. That's what Rashi just finished saying. Right? So Rashi ended up using his brain to get to this last point. It's all based on Rashi's intuitive reasoning. Okay, we'll stop here.